Hi, this is Tag again, and today I want to make another motherboard roundup. This time it will be the socket 1156 and the H55 and P55 chipsets. Now, I'm going to do this one like the 1366 ones by going down the list of motherboards here on HWBot. I also have some of the favorites here opened. So let's start off with ASRock. Unfortunately, just like 1366, ASRock isn't really all that good here. The first generation, I would say, where ASRock truly was one of the competitive or even top brands was C77, I would say. Maybe you can argue for 1155, the earlier boards, so Sandy Bridge boards, but Ivy Bridge was where it's really at. Anyways, not really much you can get here, unfortunately. Uh, they don't seem to do all that great FSB. Again, personally, I only had, I think I had a deluxe or an extreme, and it was pretty, well, underwhelming, honestly. Uh, and also there is a lot of other cheap and even well available options on this socket. Completely different than 1366. You don't have to look for super rare boards to be competitive here. So do yourself a favor and don't bother with ASRock, I would say. Uh, Anyways, let's move on to ASUS. Now, there's a whole lot of this is H55. Don't mind these. Let's go H55. There is only one manufacturer I would say that makes good boards that you should get, and we're going to get to that later. Anyways, no ASUS H55 for overclocking, not even for dual cores. However, here is the first one that is really far up the list, the Maximus 3s. Now, they somewhat lack on FSB, and by lack I mean they top out at around 255, maybe 260-ish in my opinion, in my experience. I have two of these formulas, and they are absolutely great and reliable boards for quad cores. They do good memory, ASUS BIOS, so they are pretty reliable. Error recovery is decent. They have massive overkill VRMs, so perfect for quad core chips. There's also the Extreme. Uh, like that. There we are. Now, I can't really talk about the Extreme because I never had one, but from the scores and from other people's experience, it should be on par with the Formula. And even the gene here isn't terrible, so if you see a gene, you can get it. The main downside of the 1366 genes wasn't actually like their BIOS or their layout or anything. It was mostly the VRM and uh, well, P55, the maximum is a quad-core CPU, and not even one that is that power hungry. Even the i7s are not terrible, at least. They should run well on the Gene as well. Now, personally, again, also didn't have a Gene because what comes up here is always the formula. Like, there is a bunch of these boards, and they pop up every now and then under 50 euros, and I get them. So but it's always the formula. So my personal experience with the ASUS ROG boards here is just the formula. Anyways, let's move on to the P7Ps. Now there is a couple downsides here. They don't seem to be as strong as the ROG boards with FSB. However, they are still ASUS, and well, that means the BIOS is pretty good in my opinion, and VRM is there. So if you need a board for a quad-core chip, you can go with something like the P7, P55D, any of them basically. There is some in here that like I think the LE is not really the full deal. Let's see. Yeah, some like these that don't even have VRM heatsinks maybe don't get them, but Especially premium and deluxe here are definitely worth having a look at. But this looks just terrible from the VRM side of things, to be honest. Though it has an 8 pin, it has that should be 4+1, I think, from the looks of it. That's a face up here, and I guess the rest would be that probably 4+1, knowing ASUS. So good enough, definitely. We've doubled up everything. But get one that is there's even better ones in here. I think the premium is the complete overkill version. Again, not really good for dual cores because those need a lot of FSB or BCLK rather. Exactly, that's the one with the complete overkill VRM. If I saw one of those for cheap, I would get it just for, well, having this massive overkill VRM here. Now, this board, again, the whole ASUS P7 P55D series doesn't do a whole lot of FSB, unfortunately. Look at one. I think the maximum is something like that I could find this. There was more than that, 240-ish, I think. Anyways, that's about it. Ace for Asus. Now, Biostar, I never had one, but the scores don't look good, so maybe. Actually, let's look what the T-Power did. Yeah, 231. Anyways, there might be a chance here because Biostar sometimes has decent stuff, but if you want to be like have a board that you know is going to be good and don't want to experiment on your own, then ignore Biostar as well. DFI, I had a T3EH9 here. I couldn't get that thing over, I think, to 10. Let's see if anyone did. Yeah, actually they did, but in my opinion, the BIOS is a bit, well, buggy, I would say. So, unfortunately, no DFIs with this one. I know that a lot of you like DFIs, but I would stick with the DFIs that are actually good. So earlier and AMD DFI. So I would say the last DFI that was any good was the FX 790 DFI, the AM2 plus one. ECS Elitegroup, I had a board that's not even on this list here. I had a basically overclocking board. I think it's let's see if we can find it. ECS P55, I think HK it was. Uh, yeah, that monster here. AK, okay. Absolutely useless. It didn't even get it stable at 200. So don't bother with this. It looks impressive, but forget about it. Now EVGA, and that's where I think we get to our first, like, or maybe second all around, actually first, I would say. First all around great board, this classified 200 here. Now I had one and unfortunately it died, but it does amazing both for FSB. It has, I could do like 20 megahertz or 15 megahertz more top core clock than on the Maximus boards as well. And memory is also good. So this is basically, I wouldn't say the holy grail of 1156, but it's definitely one of the strongest all-rounder boards. It has a few BIOS quirks, but they are not nearly as bad as, for example, the DFI, and not even as bad as some of the gigabytes we're going to get to. Anyways, uh, there's also some other boards. I think the FTW was also not terrible. Now, I can't speak for the non-classifieds because I never bothered with them. So I would say anything but the classified is a bit of a buy on your own risk kind of deal here. but I've heard some decent things about the like normal non-classified EVGA ones as well. However, it's right looking right now, the scores don't seem all that great. So again, to be safe, the the classified is one of the absolute tops. Now let's move on. Foxconn, you don't ever see those for some reason. Uh, can't really say anything, but again, they used to make decent 775 boards sometimes when they got lucky. But again, I haven't ever seen one of those Inferno Katana here for sale ever. So recommending a board that you can't buy and that seems to be even rarer than something like a Rampage Field Black Edition is kind of a no-go. Uh, let's move on. Now, usually I'm not a huge fan of GIGABYTE, but I would say 1156 is one of the few sockets where like GIGABYTE is outright the champion across the board. Or I would say where GIGABYTE did everything right. Not, of course, everything always has some exceptions as well. So let's start with H55. GIGABYTE is the only manufacturer where you can buy H55 boards. Now, I would recommend one specific H55 board that is this here, the H55M UD2H. Now there's one drawback on this. The VRM is not the strongest. So I would say this board is amazing for dual cores. Like I have two of them, and both of them do 260 FSB with dual cores all day long. Super easy. They do absolute ridiculous QPI speeds, like 11 gigahertz set from BIOS and shit like that with some chips. So they are amazing for that. They have some quirks like all GIGABYTE does, but this is one of the cases where like the quirks of getting a gigabyte are worth it because you are going to get the scores out of it. Uh, in my opinion, they have terrible BIOS reset behavior. My boards sometimes pretend to be dead, and you have to like leave them with the power switched off for a while until they recover. Random stuff like that. But I think a lot of that might be to blame on the Gigabyte dual BIOS that is, in my opinion, absolutely terrible. So I actually want to try like fixing the terrible behavior by desoldering one BIOS chip someday. Anyways, that is the absolute, I would say, like starter board for 1156. You can find them for cheap and actually let's see AliExpress here. Uh, they are available, they are cheap, you can just get them and get started with the platform. If you just want to try out 1156 and like you have a bunch of i3s and i5s, the dual cores, and even if you're running like quad core on ambient, just put a high RPM fan on this VRM here, and you will be probably still fine. And well, that's basically a board to get to see if you like the platform. But however, this is another board. Now, there is a really good BCLK score on this. However, I personally had two of these, and there were I had nothing but problems with them compared to the UD2H. So it's a bit cheaper, the S2H, but I wouldn't bother with them, and I can't really recommend it. Personally, I had a hard time getting these things to 250 BCLK, and there's also a cold bug mod for these boards. So I will do a video on that someday when I get to like back into 1156 benching a lot. On my UD2Hs, it worked fine. Like I gained like 30C on some chips, and on this board I did it, and it didn't work at all. So again, there is a good score, and if you like there, it seems to be possible to get this thing to behave, but it is, in my opinion, not worth getting because it is not that much cheaper than the board that is like more reliable. So that's a don't buy from me, even though there might be a chance to get it to behave. Anyways, let's move on. The other H55 gigabyte boards, I have no idea about, unfortunately. Uh, I could imagine that the USB 3 should be the same as the UD2H. So let's have a look at that. If the board layout is similar enough, I'm going to recommend that. But that, yes, that actually looks like it, yes. Now there might be some BIOS quirks here, so don't take this as a recommendation, but it might be an option. Move on to P55. Now, I know a lot of people might not like what I'm next to say here. I would personally stay away from all of the UD3 stuff. I personally had two boards, and I think there is some revision stuff going on, like with the P45 boards. That some revisions suck and some are great. And I haven't personally figured out which ones are great and which ones suck here, unfortunately. Now there's going to be decent scores here, of course. Let's see. Uh, See, 293. I had a UD3. Mine didn't do 220. I don't know why. Uh, I actually had, I think, a UD3P as well, and that also sucked. So either I'm doing something wrong specifically on the UD3s, or there's multiple revisions. So I would say stay away from the low-end UD boards. Uh, Stick with the amazing stuff if you can find it, basically, or the H55M if you can't find a high-end P55 Giga for the time being. Something like the UD4, for example, I would say that's where it starts getting good. And personally, well, the scores again prove that the UD3s are good, but I have a UD5, I think, or a UD5, and that one is reliable at high clocks, and memory is also not terrible. So uh, maybe the UD3s just hate me, but I would say anything from here. So I opened the example here, the UD6. That's the 6-slot board. It's kind of hilarious. Would be a good option. All around decent board. Again, just Gigabyte BIOS quirks, unfortunately. Though not as bad as on the H55 board. This one actually sort of has working error recovery, which is great. Anyways, UD4 should be the 4-slotter, which is looks like this. Now, again, Gigabyte did 2 generations, and the second one is called A, and we're going to get to that as well. UD5 is then another 4-slotter. I'm just going to show you them. They're all, I wouldn't say equal, but they're all decent boards. Actually, UD5, yeah. Personally, I like mine. I'm still not sure if it's an 8 or a basic UD5. I would have to check. So, definitely a good option. The high end of Gigabyte, I would say from the UD4 upwards. Now, you can buy, of course, a UD3 and sort of risk it and hope that your sample is good. There's definitely good ones out there. There's proof for that, and who am I to say that like you don't get it if there is like people who did decent on them. I'm just telling you that personally my two boards were absolute trash, and both were UD3 series. And microphone didn't want me anymore. Great. Uh, let's move on to the A series. So again, unfortunately, I don't know if mine was an A or a basic UD. So the UD3 warning is still out there. Scores are good, obviously. At least FSB memory and QPIs is decent across the uh, gigabyte product stack here. So with the A's, basically I would have the same recommendations. Start from the UD4 all the way up to the UD7, which is an amazing looking board. This should have the VRM off of a Gigabyte AS58 UD7, I think that is the same one. Uh, so absolute overkill for P55. But again, Gigabyte high-end UD stack. I would say one of the actually the best brand probably for 1156, to be honest, because basically you can get the whole stack and you can get lucky with any of them. I would just like to um, basically recommend boards that you are unlikely to get unlucky with. So that's the A, same deal, less VRM, actually this one doesn't have 6 memory slots. The UD6 has, I think. Yeah, they stuck with the 6 memory slots. I don't know why they did that. You can't run. Can you run 6 DIMMs? I don't think you can. Anyways, there's some weird stuff going on there. I can't remember why they did it. It was something with the like having multiple low density modules, I think. Don't quote me on any of this, but again, UD series boards, anything from 4 and up for the A series as well. Uh, Still an ASUS fan though, so anyways, actually what does the M board do? Probably not too good. No, actually decent. No recommendations here. I didn't have any of the M boards. So let's move on. That is OEM stuff. Intel. Uh, I know there's probably going to be someone in the comments saying, but Intel isn't all bad or something. Uh, Personally, I would say stay away from them. Not worth it. There's way, way better stuff out there. Uh, okay, that's irrelevant, irrelevant OEM, MSI. Okay. Now it seems like P55 was actually a platform where MSI didn't suck as much as usual. Now, personally, I had one of these here, GD55s, and it didn't work for me. And the score here is also not good. But there are good scores with this GD65 here. Now, personally, I still don't like MSI BIOS, and I don't want to say too much positive about them, because personally, I didn't have the only boards that are like that have scores behind them. But there is like I would say a mild recommendation towards the high end of MSI here. I I wouldn't go as far as to say that they are like on par with like Gigabyte or Asus, but the scores look decent, and so I would say if you're feeling adventurous, go out and give like the GD 65 to 85 a shot if you see any of them for cheap. Now I wouldn't like pay top uh, prices like for high-end Aces maybe. Actually, I wouldn't even recommend you paying more than like maybe 70 euros ish for the high-end Aces ROG stuff. If any boards on this socket are like worth paying collectors or like high-end markups for, it would be something like a Gigabyte UD7. But I wouldn't really pay for the Asus ones that much. They're not that, or actually, the true unicorn board here would be the EVGA Classy, of course. Sorry, I forgot about that. Anyways, MSI, no personal experiences except for a GD55, which was garbage, unfortunately. So the like semi recommendations are going off of scores here, so keep that in mind. Let's move on. That's OEM stuff, OEM stuff, OEM stuff. Soyo is also sort of useless. Okay, so I think that's all manufacturers completed. Now let's have a look at like what I would say are my top overall picks. Now the I would say overall uh first place for everything, so across the board would be I'm going to put a draw between the high-end Gigabyte. So let's just take the UD7 here, for example, and this here. So those are going to be my like absolute top for everything board picks. The Classy and the Gigabyte P55A. I'm going to just go with the UD7, even though I don't have it, but probably UD3 is fine as well. Uh, so those are the top overall. Then the top dual core pick goes to not this USB 3 version, the UD2H. So that is in my opinion, the best board if you're benching dual cores on this platform, and basically without competition. Maybe you can argue this one will do as well, because the universal boards, again, exclusively dual cores, this one wins. And if you're doing exclusively quad cores and basically want a board that well has a reliable error recovery more than want to get the top scores. Now you can get top scores with this Maximus. That's yes, definitely possible. But uh, I I feel like QPI clock especially is a bit lacking on ASUS compared to Gigabyte. So that is going to be sort of my quad core only top pick, the formula. Now I know most of those picks aren't really affordable or easy to find, except for this one. So if you just want to go and get started, by all means, get the H55M UD2H. They're absolutely amazing little boards for what they are. And it's definitely my favorite Gigabyte board of all time, probably. Because unlike the X58 AOC, this one actually is the best at something. The X58 AOC is great, but it gets beaten in a lot of things by other boards, especially the Black Edition. So this one, absolute recommendation from my side. If you're out hunting for like rare boards and want to get something that is really really good for everything, UD7, Classy 200. If you're okay with like uh, personally, this is enough, I would say, for everything. But still, it's not the highest end. Uh, it appears to be more available than the UD7, definitely. I see them from time to time, but most of the time the people want too much money for them, unfortunately. I think I paid 40 euros or 50 for mine, which was okay for a P55, I would say. So I think that's about it. Let's end on the UD7, and I hope this helped you. And please correct me in the comments if I missed something again, which I'm absolutely sure I did. Anyways, that's it. Bye.